Hi and welcome. Let's talk about the two characters that are, I think, the least likable, or you could say the most hateable, and the most likable from Ship of Magic. So, spoilers for book 1 of Robin Hobb's Liveship Traders trilogy. I feel like that's a tongue twister. The Liveship Traders, book 1, spoilers. So, in my opinion, the most likable and least likable are Kyle and Wintro, the father and son, the one with all the authority and control, and the one with zero authority or control. The slave trader and the slave, the haven and the vestrit, the abuser and the abused. And that is something that I think Robin Hobb is so good at, is writing a character that we can just hate. Before this, my most hated character was probably Galen from Assassin's Apprentice. The new slot for my most hated character has been taken over by another Robin Hobb character. Go figure. And something that both Galen and Kyle have in common is that they are highly abusive. And something that I really appreciate about the way Hobb wrote these two men that are so hateable is that she allows us to hate them. She doesn't give us some big tragic backstory. We're not seeing things from their point of view in a way that makes sense to us. They are simply nasty abusers. And for someone who is abusive, there is no excuse for that. There is nothing that should make us say, oh, well, I can understand why they might do that. No, there's no excuse. Hobb understands that, and we can just feel free to hate Kyle and the way he treats people and his ship, and especially his son. And I think that's part of why I hate Kyle more than Galen, is because Kyle is abusive to his own son. Of course, Kyle doesn't see it that way. He doesn't see it as abuse. He doesn't view himself as a bad guy. Villains rarely do. Kyle seems to really, truly believe that by him taking control and telling everyone else what they should do, forcing them to do what he thinks they should do, he's doing what's best for them. He'll make the family prosper. He can fix everything, all these supposed mistakes that the Vestrit family had been making in losing their fortune and going from rich to slowly getting poorer. He can see destitution in their future, but he swoops in and he's going to save the family. And he feels really justified with everything that he does. He's the dad, the husband, the son-in-law. He loves them. Or says he does, which is not the same thing. He says he wants what's best for them, and obviously he's right, so they should hop to like sailors on his ship. And because the only way that Kyle knows how to discipline is ship's discipline, he uses this with his own son before they even get to the ship and is willing to... My cat is playing with a rock. I have to take it from her. That was so distracting. Okay, what was I saying? Ship's discipline. He literally knocks Wintro senseless, and he thinks it is a fair punishment. And if he secretly deep down thinks maybe it wasn't quite a fair disciplinary measure, he's not going to admit it. He's not the type of man who could admit that he did something wrong. And Kyle certainly falls prey to what Amber accuses Mingsley of in the case of Paragon, and that is confusing what's morally right with what's profitable. That was kind of a theme through the book, I noticed, and oh boy, it's not just a fictional idea for a fantasy world, is it? For some of these characters, the morals follow the profits, like a Ferengi. Or an American. He is also a huge hypocrite when it comes to Malta versus Althea, the two Vestrit girls in his life that he feels responsible for. Kyle really believes that Ephraim spoiled Althea, letting her have her own way, letting her have what she wants too much to the detriment of the family. Althea is going to ruin the family's reputation. So he puts her off of her family ship, threatens to shut her into her room. He would love to control Althea and her choices. He feels responsible for her. She's not doing the responsible thing, so he'll go ahead and make her. But when it comes to Malta, his own girl, he cannot say no to her. Kind of like Ephraim to Althea. Because it's not really about what either of these girls, Malta or Althea, is choosing to do. It's not really about their choices. It's about himself, Kyle, getting to control those choices, and because of what he sees as the proper place of a woman. Being a pretty ornament for a man to enjoy is perfectly acceptable. So when Malta is asking to dress older than she is and come out to society as marriageable and do all these things that a 13-year-old is not old enough or experienced enough for, that won't ruin the family's reputation. That's a woman's place in society. She's there to have men look at her and dance with her and marry her. What Althea wants is independence and sailing and things that are not traditionally the woman's place. And for that, Kyle wants to control her. Those are unacceptable to him. And because of his views on women and their place, he never really takes his own wife seriously. And while I'll talk more about her in the other Ship of Magic video I'll be making for the other characters, I will say that she has always been happy to kind of sit back and let Kyle make choices. He wasn't as controlling when he wasn't in charge, when he didn't have the authority that he has now. And when Keffria wanted to dedicate Wintrow to Saw's temple, he saw it as giving in to her. He didn't really want to. He didn't see that as a good, strong life path for a man, but he gave in to his wife. It's what she wanted. And now that he's back, now that they need Wintrow to be with the ship, and now that he comes back and shows that he's not like this man's man that a sailor tries to be, Kyle probably feels kind of good, like he's been proven right that Wintrow never should have gone. It was never his choice to send him. Now he can be like, I told you so, Keffria. Now we need him to be a sailor. He's totally unsuited to sailor life. You have all but ruined him. But don't worry, some good old-fashioned ship's discipline will shape him up. And Kyle has absolutely no understanding of Wintrow's feelings or thought processes. He cannot comprehend that Wintrow, when offered a ship and swift matehood and then captaincy, would still choose priesthood. To the end of the book, Kyle never gains any understanding of Wintrow. He doesn't want to. He doesn't think he should have to. He spends the whole book trying to force Wintrow into the shape that he thinks Wintrow should be in. And when Wintrow is not easily forced, he gets so angry. And because he thinks his control is right and justified, he does not understand, and probably doesn't want to understand, the damage he is doing to both Wintrow and Vivacia by forcing the relationship. He doesn't take time to understand how a live ship is different from a normal deadwood ship. He just kind of stays nasty and hateable the whole time, clear to the end. And because his control is slowly slipping out of his grasp, he just compensates by getting more abusive, to the point where he allows his own son to be tattooed as a slave to his ship. He does kind of realize he acted hastily and knows, actually, I don't know if he knows how wrong it is. He seems more to be worried about what Keffria will think when they get home. She's gonna be mad, and he should be right to worry about that. He should have thought of it earlier, but he didn't get to where he is today by carefully thinking over his decisions. Okay, on to Wintrow. Now, I said at the beginning, he's probably the most likable character in the book, and to me, he really started out that way. But you know what they say? Familiarity breeds contempt. I don't feel contempt for Wintrow, but as we get to know him better and getting into his mind more, he's not just the calm and mature boy learning to be a priest, he's still a young teenage boy who at heart is kind of self-centered. But again, we see with Hobb, like with Assassin's Apprentice, she's pretty good at writing a teenage boy. And Wintrow is nothing like Fitz. She doesn't have a teenage boy caricature that she uses over and over again. These are very different types of people that she's writing. Wintrow is intelligent and passionate and brave and gentle-hearted and devout, and not the kind of guy who likes to raise his voice. Wintrow is the type of person who can see beauty and sees the touch of Saw in all the things that he beholds before him. He loves his life in the monastery and he hates the thought of giving it up. It feels really unjust to him. His family has gone back on their word to him, to Althea, to Vivacia, and he can sense the wrongness of it all. He doesn't fully realize what his family has done to the ship by separating Vivacia and Althea, but he knows it's wrong. And still being a very young person, he does still hold on to some of his inherent self-centeredness of, I loved my life at the monastery. I don't want to give that up because that's what I want. He's not ready to give up his peaceful life for his family. Now, if he had known to expect it, if it had been something necessary, if maybe it had been a temporary thing with the agreement that he could go back, he probably would have been willing to do it. But the choice was never offered him. It was forced onto him. And it doesn't feel fair. And it's not like his father is actually trying to turn him into a better person by making him be a sailor. He might have been able to respect that. His father is literally trying to beat him into his own image. Wintrow is forced into this life he didn't want, a relationship he didn't want, a relationship that he doesn't agree with. It was taken from Althea. It might even go against his religion. He's not sure, but it doesn't really feel good. It doesn't sit with him well right now. And he tries so hard not to blame Vivacia herself for all this, but it's hard not to. And she can sense that, and it makes things really hard between them. Being on board ship is the hardest time in his life so far. Besides the cruel way he's treated towards jealousy, he's not allowed to be himself. He's not free to be who he really feels like he is. Sailors are not priests. When he behaves like a priest, he creates separation between him and the rest of his crew, even his father, and that can make it so easy for the rest of the crew to look at him and say, you're not one of us. What, you think you're better than us? But then when he wants to behave like a sailor, to be accepted, because he doesn't feel like a sailor, he doesn't want to be one, the only reason to start behaving like one is for the acceptance of the crew, that feels like he's betraying himself. He's not being true to himself. And there is just this huge battle for identity for both him and for Vivacia. Vivacia was supposed to have this generational willingness of the Vestrit family to give of themselves to create who she is, her personality, her sense of self. And at the very time when she should have had the person who was so connected to her and having that ripped away from her, she has to figure out who she is. In some ways, having Wintrow instead of Althea kind of helps her discover her own self independent of the Vestrits. There's a lot that's not known about Wizardwood and live ships, and this was not how it was meant to be for them. There's no other live ships with her to give her advice and help her through this time. It's just her and Wintrow kind of resents her and doesn't even really want to be there. She's scared of serpents and nobody cares. She gets full of slaves and nobody seems to care. Things start to come to a head towards the end of the book between Wintrow and Vivacia, and again, some of that self-centeredness is coming to the surface in Wintrow. He decides he has to take matters into his own hands and do things for himself that no one else is going to do for him. He wants to be a priest. He wants to spend time in quiet contemplation. He wants to escape back to the monastery because it's what he wants, regardless of anyone else. Not that any of those desires are wrong, but he's thinking about himself. He purposefully leaves her, which kind of breaks her a little bit. And when he gets back, it's not the same. They don't go back to the relationship they had before. She's having to go through her own journey of self-discovery, just like Winthrop, but she reminds him to look deep within himself. His desire is for the priesthood, to serve Saw, and here he has an opportunity to do that. So now he finally shows some real maturity, not the maturity that he thinks he has, but like from experience now, instead of serving Saw because of what he'll get out of it, he decides on some actual selfless service. So he goes below to tend to the other slaves. And in a way, by that choice, by deciding that it's not about him, he kind of lowers himself. That's when he takes a more true step towards becoming a real priest. And he probably doesn't even realize that yet. Then he meets another former priest, slaves get freed, huge battle, storm, ships gets taken. The slaves are rejoicing, yay, it's Captain Kennett, he'll free us. And now, at the end of the book, both Winthrop and Vivacia have this weird new relationship with Captain Kennett. They're not under Kyle anymore. Kyle is still there. He's not in charge of them. His authority and his control have been taken away. We don't see how that pans out yet, and I haven't read the second book yet, so don't tell me anything. And their future, Winthrop and Vivacia, has gone from bleak to utterly hopeless to now maybe a little brighter. Still unsure. We will have to find out how things work out for them in the next book, Mad Ship. My next Ship of Magic video will be about the 4 women, Ronica, Althea, Kefria, Malta. You can follow me on my Instagram. The link is in the description, and subscribe here for more bookish content like this. And I'll see you next time. Bye. I only have the second and third ones. I don't actually have the first one. I love nautical book covers. These are beautiful.